The next thing we're going to do is actually add some photography to this database here. So let's click the up one level button twice and 3 times until you're back up at this level where you can see our geodatabase and a few other files we have here. So if we've gone and we wanted to get some aerial photography for our garden to start our GIS project, one of the most common ways of getting photography is to talk to your local government. So you can call up your local city or town or county, and if they have a planning department, that's usually a good place to start, and you can talk with them and tell them what you're up to, and generally they can provide you with their most recent photography. In some cases they'll have a licensing agreement and won't be able to do that for you, but I find that the majority of times you can get some photography from them for free, and then they'll send it to you either through email or send you a disc in the mail. And you'll get this, and you'll get the photography, and it may have one or many files on the disk or in the email that you'll need to do something with to be able to start working with them. Now you could probably save them to your computer and just add them in to your ArcMap document and be able to look at them and manipulate them, but it's nice to keep all of our data kind of together in the nice container that the geodatabase provides us. So what I've done here is we have this file called Aerial Photography 2009 that maybe we've received on a disk or through an email, and we want to add it to our geodatabase here. So what we can do is we can just right-click on the geodatabase and hit import. And if you remember, we talked about vector and raster. Aerial photography is a raster format, so we want to import a raster data set. We'll click on that, and it says, which input rasters do you want to add? And it gives us a spot to add multiple. So sometimes if you get multiple files, you can select all those and add them at once, but we're just going to hit this little browse button, the folder icon here. And my box here opened up to Arnold Arboretum, but we're working with UC Davis, so we'll hit this drop down here, and it should say under folder connections our GIS for Public Gardens Workshop. Click on that, and then click on UC Davis Arboretum, and there's our aerial photography. You can select that, hit add, and then it adds it to our list. If we have multiple files, we could add those in too. Then all we have to do is click OK. And then it goes through the process, and it's working behind the scenes, and it should be working to add that data into our geodatabase. You may get a little, there you go, sometimes it takes a while, but at the bottom it gives us a little progress ticker that shows us that it's working on it. And then when it's all done, it'll pop up this little window here with a green check mark telling us that things worked. And then we can go into the database and actually see the results of what we've done. So if we double click on the UC Davis Arboretum geodatabase, we look inside, and now we see a new addition to our geodatabase called Aerial Photography 2009. And we can click on the Preview tab here and see the results and see that we've got this photograph of the UC Davis Arboretum. The Arboretum is kind of a linear garden that goes along a water feature that pretty much runs down the center of it. And today we're going to be working with the area that's kind of bounded by the parking lot on the south and the parking lot on the north, and the 2 bridges that cross the water. So that little chunk of land with the water running down the middle is what we'll be kind of building out our GIS for today. And to get out of this, we can hit Contents tab and then click on the Up One Level tab, and it gets us back to our view that we're working with. Now we might also want to add this photography to our catalog, so that we're kind of creating a catalog. If we have more, we can add all that in there, and it's pretty easy to do that. As we discovered yesterday, you can just click on this photography and drag it up to the aerial photography catalog, and it adds it in there. And then as we get more and more photography, we can add it in there, and that kind of serves as a nice container to contain all that stuff for us. Any questions about that so far?
Can you use Google Maps?
You cannot use Google data. I don't think that's available, but there are options to add data from online, such as there's data, if you're familiar with Bing Maps, is really similar to Google Maps. That data is available, I believe, to add in. The only problem with using that data is it comes in varying resolutions. So sometimes you may get lucky and the area that you're interested in has really nice photography and you can see most of what you need. But other times you'll find that it will be kind of poor and you won't be able to make out things. So that's one thing that's really important to know about with this photography, is that it does come in varying resolutions. And if you're going to be calling up your local government to find out if you can get some photography from them, it's important to ask them what the resolution of the photography is. And resolution is kind of measured in the size of the little squares that make up the image. So if you've zoomed really far in on any particular picture, you can see that it start to be made up of different little squares, right? So those squares are called pixels, and each pixel kind of has a size to it that it represents on the ground. So in the case of gardens, we find that generally you need a resolution of about 6 inches or better to be able to make out most of the features on the ground. So a resolution of 6 inches means that you could see an object that's 6 inches or bigger in the photograph. So you may be able to see it, but it may just look like a black square. It may not look like much. So generally with 6-inch photography, you can definitely see cars, you can see people, you can make out individual larger plants like shrubs, you can maybe be able to make out light posts and things like that. So the majority of things you can make out with that size of photograph, and that's what we're going to be working with today. So you generally want to ask for that kind of photography or better. Now let's look at this air photography in a little bit more detail. And if we double click on air photography 2009 or right click and hit properties, it gives us a little information about this guy. And we can see here that it's got this value for cell size, and it says 0.5. And this 0.5, we're not sure what units it's in yet, but that means that each pixel in our photograph is, or each cell, is of size 0.5 on each side. So we need to find out what the units are on this to make a little bit more sense. So if we scroll down here, we can see that there's some data on what's called a spatial reference. And this is kind of a complex concept to consider when thinking about GIS, but we know the Earth is a curved surface, and generally when we look at maps, we're looking at that curved surface represented as a flat surface. So anytime you take something that's curved and try to flatten it out, you have to perform some kind of stretching or adjustment with that information to be able to represent it flat. So if you look at a map of the world, a lot of times you'll see Greenland and Antarctica look really huge. Everything at the top of the map looks really enormous because we've taken that curved surface and stretched it out so that it fits flat. So there's many different ways to perform that stretching. Some forms of stretching will preserve area so that you can still measure things accurately. Some will preserve distance so you can measure things 2D accurately. There's many different ways of doing this. So there's many different spatial references out there that kind of do perform that stretching for us. So spatial references also are known as projections, or ways to project a curved surface onto a flat surface. And each area of the country or each area of the world, there's many different options for doing this. In our case, we're using what's used most commonly for gardens, and it's called the state plane system, which is actually a way of measuring coordinates and performing this stretching. And in our case, every state has, or each state plane, as the name kind of implies, has different systems. So this case, we're doing the UC Davis Arboretum, and it's in California, so we're using a state plane system from California. And each state is generally divided up into multiple zones. So here in Massachusetts, we have one for the mainland and one for the islands. So So in California, we're using Zone 2. And generally, what you need to know about this is this is generally a one-time process, is that you pick the system when you start your GIS. And the easiest way to find out what system to use is when you're calling up your local government to try to get some photography from them, ask them what system they use, and whatever system they use is going to be fine for you too. And it's generally the state plane and whatever's appropriate for your part of the country. So, any questions about that?
Some of it's metric and sometimes it's...
Yes, so that's important thing to know is if you see the next line down here is that it says what our linear unit is, and we're using US feet here. And you could use metric, but it's for the most common for state plane systems. Most people use feet. So that's always good to know. But through this process, by figuring this out, we know now that the units for our map are in feet. So anytime we measure anything on the map, it's going to be in feet. Anytime we see coordinates, those are going to be in feet as well. And also now we know that our cell size up here at the top, this 0.5 is feet. So that means that the pixels in our image are 6 inches. Any questions about that?
What was that number right after foot?
Down here? This is the angular unit. So this is saying that anytime we...
just right after...
Oh, right here? That's actually telling us, I believe, how many feet are in a meter, I think is what that's saying. Yeah, I believe that's what that's saying. Sure.
Is this spatial reference ready a property of this image?
Yeah, this has already come pre-assigned. We've already set this up, and also...
It's already been stretched.
Exactly. Yep, it's already ready to go. And at the beginning, the part of the process that we're not covering today of actually downloading the data model from our website and setting it up, in the instructions, it gives you instructions on how to deal with your spatial reference, and that's generally something that you set up at the very beginning, right when you're going through that downloading and setting up of the project. And then once you're done with that, you generally won't have to encounter it too many other times. So. Okay, so we can hit OK or cancel on this box to close it out. And then I think we're about done with that particular portion here. So let's go through. I actually had us set up to take lunch now, but I think we can actually start some digitizing. Yeah, let's do that. Okay, so I think what we're going to do here is we can close out our art catalog application by hitting the red X in the upper right hand corner.